Due to the graphic nature of its content, listener discretion is advised.
From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, we fight our country's battles in the air, on land and sea. First to
On this episode of Cigars and Sea Stories, Mike and Juslin sit down to interview Coast Guard veteran Darrel Fusaro, world-renowned producer, podcast personality, and inspirational speaker. You should see my setup right now, brother. I've got...
Well, I saw those moving tarps behind you. That's real East Coast. Those moving blankets.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's our... that's like hanging from the ceiling around the tiles in order to create a square or a sound booth.
Yeah, I saw that. That was smart.
So, thank you. That was 11:30 at night. Juslin's getting everything ready, trying to get, into the chair, getting ready to record.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I hear you fine.
Oh, there's
Hey,
Juslin.
nice to meet you. I'm Sebastian.
Oh, nice to meet you. Now, were you the guy who traveled with Mike?
Yes, that's me.
Oh, that's you. All right. Wow, you survived.
Survived somehow. Made it through.
You should get a medal just for cruising around the country with that madman, from what I saw.
It's like being strapped to a rocket. It really is.
Yeah, because you look like the straight man in all those videos.
The straight man.
Yeah.
Well, I
If you
appreciate
guys-
that.
I didn't mean it, that way. I meant in the comical sense of the word.
He is thoroughly
okay.
straight, though. Let me tell you.
Oh, yeah. Well, I meant more like Abbott versus Costello, Curly versus Moe, that sort of straight.
Oh, good Lord. Hell yes. Well, it's funny because when we were in Iraq, we sat on cordons for hours, and we were never in the same truck. So now here we are driving across the country, and we're finally in the same vehicle. And we have the opportunity to chat and talk. I think we listened to maybe 6 to 8 songs on the radio during that whole road trip.
Oh, man.
It was one of those experiences where you're just cruising across the nation, checking everything out. And it's gorgeous. I love it.
I can't believe I've yet to do that, man. I got to do that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely you do. I tell you what, we'll go out for a road trip. We'll head on out to the West Coast. We'll start in L.A., pick you up, and just wham.
Perfect.
What do you think?
I'm ready.
I'm down, man. Let's go up. We'll take, what do you think? We'll take something with a drop top all the way up the coast, right? Go up to William Hearst's place or whatever, that crazy
Oh, yeah,
castle.
yeah.
Let's do that. We'll go check that out because it'll be freaking awesome. And then keep on going. Big Sur.
Oh, yeah.
We'll go to Oregon, try to pump our own gas, get arrested. Ugh.
Well, you could go to New Jersey and have to do that, too, and get
Right.
arrested.
Right. Oh, good Lord. Yep.
The rules we make for ourselves in this nation.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, man, that's what we can do. We can wind up going all the way up to Seattle. Check out Puget Sound. I was looking at something earlier today, actually, on Facebook. There's this gentleman who stands out on his balcony each evening at sunset and plays taps.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. I didn't read the
love it.
article.
I love it. Yeah, what it was... So when he was a kid, he unfortunately had polio, but he grew up as, a musician and extremely talented. And so each afternoon, in the morning, he winds up reading the newspaper and seeing when sunrise is going to be. And then each afternoon he gives it a practice, and a few good toots or what have you, and then goes out onto the balcony and plays it. And all of his neighbors go out there and listen to him or stand at attention. I mean, they all just stop and they enjoy the music. And it's Some of them feel the emotion that we feel whenever we hear taps. Some of us, they just find it to be beautiful. I mean, it's great. It's so great. I love hearing stories like that.
Oh yeah.
Yep, that's what we got to do. We'll hit up Redwood Forest, Yosemite, Tahoe. We're doing this. It would be cool on motorcycles also. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I could take the Harley all the way out there.
It's been done.
Hez, because I know you're not listening to my podcast, because she can't stand my voice enough already. You know, I'm gonna ride all the way up the coast on motorcycles with Darrell. That'll be cool.
Well, it's actually a year ago today. Not today, but a year ago this week, a little less than a week ago, we met in Syracuse.
Yep. Yeah. That was at EBV. You're exactly right. Yep. Yeah, Entrepreneurship Boot Camp for Veterans. I love EBV. Yeah, you were a speaker over there.
Yeah, I know.
No, you did a fantastic job.
I thought so at first, and then I didn't hear anything for a year. I thought, uh-oh. And then finally I got the feedback a year later, and it was all super positive. And I was like, all right, here's another example of don't believe what I think. At least don't believe everything I think. Because it was all very positive.
You know, it's interesting because I think we all kind of walked away from EBV. In case people don't know, while you're at EBV, it feels like you're, drinking from a fire hose. There's so much information. There's so many speakers. You're eating lunch, and Darrell is giving you a story, and it's a lot to take in. And I bet a lot of us, I know I did, I wound up jumping out of EBV and starting to do business. And it's interesting because all along the way, we would like each other's stuff on Facebook and what have you. But Bennett, for instance, Bennett Tanton, he had a few different back and forth. Another fantastic individual. We all connected, and Bennett and I kind of were like, hey, do you see what Darrell's up to? Oh, man, that's cool. All right, cool. When are we going to reach out to him? Hey, this is when we're going to reach out to him. No joke. Because we were toiling away in the office, and we were going through everything that we wanted to do, but we didn't have anything of value to be able to bring to the table yet. And so then it's like all of that positive feedback starts swinging back your way. You watch. There's going to be numerous missions that are going to circle back towards you because you made a serious impact.
Well, listen, I appreciate it. And all you guys had an impact on me. I actually... I was there only like one day, and of course the dreaded slot is to speak while people are starving and now they want to eat. But oh man, the odds were stacked against me. But the bottom line is I have made such great relationships, and that's the benefit of any of these any even in education, well, especially we're going to talk about our time in the service and how that's been so such a great benefit to us. And I think the most important thing that comes out of any of these I was going to say any of these events or circumstances is the relationships we make.
Couldn't agree more.
I'm seeing that also firsthand coming into this thing, and Mike has been trying to get me to start applying for EBV as well, and I see how a lot of you guys work together that have gone through that and that are helping in that regard. It's nice to see everyone willing to work together.
You know what? This is bringing up an interesting point that I think I need to share, and it's something that I'm realizing just now as we're talking. It's pretty unique that what happens with people who are veterans as opposed to just civilians that have been civilians. Not all civilians, but not all of them, but the majority is there tends to be more of a feeling of comparison and competition and reluctance to cheerleader the other, people in the same field or doing the same thing, because there's almost like that fear that if I give too much to him, I may not get enough for me. But what I've noticed since EBV and meeting all of yourself, Michael, and Bennett, and Becky Watson and Joe Williams, and just about everybody. I can go on and on. Tim Parkhurst. Everybody is so supportive of one another. There's no immature, you know what I mean, that petty rivalries that sometimes happen, a reluctance to, share all my cards because, I don't really want to let Michael know about everything because I don't want him to pass me on this deal. None of that. There's none of that. It's so wonderful. I'm sure that's what you're seeing too with everyone's posts and how we all communicate with each other. It's all very like, oh my God, I got to let Michael know about this. Like if something pops up that I know can further your cause, or that I think would be beneficial to you, I don't even hesitate. And another thing that I have to share about you, Michael, is which was really wonderful to experience because I don't often experience it with, civilian, fellow civilians or other, civilians that I've worked with, is a few weeks ago, and I'm going to share this since we're recording it because it's something that's amazing, and it's a quality that I believe most veterans seem to have, and it's so wonderful when you experience it on the other side. And a few weeks ago, I reached out to you because our veterinarian is an avid amateur photographer, right? He has all the great equipment and he loves to shoot photos. And this guy is a super fanatic for the Blue Angels. And he has these remarkable shots. And one in particular, I've never seen in the Blue Angels, like their catalog of photos. He has these two fighter jets, which I shared with you. And they're like perfectly lined up with their landing gear down. One, inverted, the other one flying, the way it's supposed to, right side up. And it is just perfect. I mean, it's how he got that photo is just miraculous. And for years, I have mentioned you should contact Blue Angels publicity office, at least share that with them. I mean, if anything, if they decide to use it and give you credit, or who knows, they might buy it from you. We don't know, but you got to share that with them. They need to see that because it's so wonderful. And the years go by, and either he gets busy or he sends an email and hits a wall. So it was a Monday, and I thought, wait a minute, I'm going to reach out to a couple of guys I know in the service. And for some reason, I was inspired to fire you an email, that morning with the picture explaining the situation. Within 2 hours, you may not even remember this, but I remember it because I looked at my watch. Within 2 hours, you had my veterinarian lined up, mutual emails, introductions with the person to share the photo with. Not only that, there was even a line in there, they're really looking forward to seeing the photo. That was such a wonderful experience. And I told you over and over, because I'm like you, and I'm not saying this like, I'm not trying to brag. It's just something I enjoy. I enjoy, like, if someone contacts me and there's a way that I'm able to help someone, if it's within my tool wheelhouse, I will go out of my way because it brings me great enjoyment to do it. And we had talked about this. And you said something that you've summed it up in a very simple sentence that I've been using in my mind. I've always thought about it, but you gave it the perfect wording. It's always add value.
Yeah. And I thank you for those kind words. Yes. Always add value. Always add value to every equation. Any scenario or situation.
Well, I mean, it's a clear-cut method of staying above reproach in any situation. I mean, hey, I'm here to help. You can't really go wrong with that kind of a mentality. And I mean, even if it's in more complex versions of business, if you're going at it with the mindset that everyone's going to walk away from this table where whatever they bring, they receive an appropriate amount for. You know, everyone walks away happy. Everyone has their needs met. You know, whatever the need is, so to speak.
Well, yeah, it actually is so. If you know, it's funny. I think we're wired that way naturally. We may not all realize it until you get into the practice of it. Some of us just naturally are in tune with it. But if you're mindful of how you feel, how your body and your mood responds, it's obvious that we're wired to add value to each other's lives, because there's nothing that brings me greater satisfaction in the way I feel all over, not just in my mood, but even my health and well-being. I feel when I do something, when I'm able to help someone in a way that that's enjoyable for me, that I have the means and wherewithal to do, it just feeds me. I mean, there are times too where I forget that, and there's been situations where, I've been asked to do things, and my first thought is, I got so much to do. But you know what? The amazing thing is, even if you start off with that, as soon as I start moving in the direction, and this is like one of those unexpected things where someone needs your help, where you're not really like, it's not just a call and a favor. This is just like out of the blue, and you're like, I had other plans.
Yeah.
But the amazing thing is, once I just give into it, just accept it and move with it, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe that just an hour ago I was complaining like I had to do this. Now it's like, it adds life. It adds life to our life. It adds life to the recipient's life. And you're right when you mentioned it is the way to succeed in business. There's even a quote you made me think of by Napoleon Hill, who wrote the book Think and Grow Rich, and he says the quickest and most effective, and I'm paraphrasing, but I'm fairly close because it's one of my favorites, but the quickest and most effective way to succeed is to help another succeed.
Wow. Yep. One of my favorite titles as well.
There seems to be no shortage of people that are in need of help as well. That's the amazing part of it. So it's like if we could get just a few people to just kind of wake up to that concept, that idea of adding value instead of being afraid. So many of our decisions are based on fear these days.
Oh, well, it's easy. It's easy to fall into fear with all the news and, everything that's going on. Well, you guys just experienced on your tours, firsthand. And we just, here in the States, just get the news secondhand. It can be overwhelming. I got to protect what's mine. It tends to be the knee-jerk thought.
Right. Yeah, it's easy to do. Hey, but you've had a long road, in your different various experiences in order to get to this mindset. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd love for you to share your story, especially with Juslin, because he hears me say all these wonderful things about you and doesn't really have a background, to frame it with. So, you were born and raised out in New Jersey, correct? You're an East Coast guy?
Yeah, don't hold that against me.
I won't. You don't have any family members that happen to have, waste management companies, do you?
I'm really not allowed to talk about that.
All right.
No, it's actually, believe it or not, my younger brother is, I guess you either end up, when you live in New Jersey, is in corruption or cleaning up corruption, because my brother's a federal agent now. He actually works with Homeland Security, and he lives in New Jersey still. And I'm very proud of him. He's also a veteran. He started his career in the Air Force.
Nice, right on.
Yeah. Go ahead.
What was he doing in the Air Force?
He was actually a jet mechanic. So he would maintain all those, the fighter planes, and he was stationed out in Nellis Air Force Base, Nevada. And he went in without his college education, and this actually ties in perfectly to my story. Myself and my younger brother, we grew up in New Jersey, and everything was fine, fairly fine until until I was about 10 years old. My brother was just 6 years old, and a couple of things just seemed to just happen, and then everything kind of exploded and spiraled out of control. And my grandfather was murdered, and that of course was a shock on New Year's Eve, 1970, and I was just like 8 years old. And then shortly after that, my mom got really sick with alcoholism, and her and my dad got divorced, and my dad did his best to try to raise two kids on his own while going to work. And he was a very angry guy, and I have a lot more understanding for him now. At the time, I didn't know. I'd walk in the house, he was so unpredictable. I didn't know if I walked in the living room, if I was going to get handed a $10 bill or get smacked in the back of the head. You know what I mean? It was one of those. And not too long after that, while I was in junior high, my dad got sick with colon cancer. I know this sounds like what next? Everything but a fire in the orphanage. But I'm not sharing this as a poor me story. But now that I'm saying it, I'm like, oh my God, what next? So anyway, he got really sick with colon cancer and died a year after I graduated high school. And it was just myself and my younger brother, and that's when things really started to spiral out of control personally for me. I got accepted to art school. A local college, and I was majoring in art. That was always been my thing. It was one thing I was good at and enjoyed doing. And I really enjoyed doing it because it made other people happy. Isn't that funny? As I think back now, I liked drawing in school and, in class. To share with the other kids, it was a way to break the ice. And I got accepted to this school. And what they do in any art school or anything, the thing and the goal is to inspire the freshmen, with what you're going to be able to accomplish. And, in the art department, the thing that would do, what they imagined would do this best would be to take the freshmen to the seniors, art exhibit, which they had up in September. Because then you get to see what wow, one day I'll be able to do these things, right? And this is great for well-adjusted freshmen. But I walked into that gallery and I looked at all this great artwork, and I just went, oh, what's the use? I was overwhelmed. And at the same time, I was, I found, I had the same condition my mother suffered from, although I didn't know it at the time. And, I would drink to try to emotionally, I tried to, to make at the time, when I would drink, it seemed to make me feel comfortable in my own skin. It was an illusion that I was okay. All it was doing was just anesthetizing, that part of my brain that was always overwhelmed for a little while. But then once, the alcohol wears off, I'm still in the same boat I was in before, So, needless to say, I didn't do well at school, and I started looking for other options. You know, what am I going to do? At that time, my younger brother was just starting to graduate high school, and he had an interest in joining the service. I thought it was a great idea because I didn't know how to help. I mean, if he ended up not joining the service, this is what I can't, just telling you this, I can't even stress how grateful I am to the military. I mean, unfortunately, the military in general, the idea of the military, I believe sure, everybody looks at the military historically as something very patriotic and something to be proud of as an American, right? But in general, with, the general civilian population who doesn't really have any experience, whether they've been in the military themselves or they have a relative who has been in the military, they kind of see it as this separate thing. Like this separate thing, and I don't want to sound derogatory, but there's a little bit of, oh yeah, well that guy was, he was in the military. You know what I mean? There's this like, like this, this thing like it's, I hate to say it, but the first reaction, because I'm pretty good at taking people's inventories, the first response, when you talk to people at the military, I can tell they just look at it as, it's kind of like, I guess if you have nothing else going on. I mean, those, like, people think of it like that. And you know what? I could tell you, yeah, maybe some of us, like myself, joined as a way. I was looking for something, something that would bring me to a higher level. So I still considered it, something virtuous in my mind. So my brother was looking to join the service, and I was going to say, thank God he did. Right after high school, he went right into the Air Force. Because had he not, I don't know what would have happened to him or me, because it would have just been the two of us, and I was already starting to flounder. So now he's in the service, he's in the Air Force. Okay, so I don't have to worry about him. But now I'm the problem. I'm having problems. And, just to show my respect for you Marines, when I was thinking about joining, I went through the list, Marine Corps, no way. I'm serious, but I don't know if I'm this serious. You know what I mean? And so that being said, I mean that with the highest respect. Then underneath that, I was going, Army? Well, and I'm being totally honest, I go, these commercials for the Army, they just look really dusty. Because back then in the late 70s, it was just these commercials of people driving tanks through dirt. And I was like, okay, that's not for me. And then Navy, and I'm thinking, God forbid, 6 months on a ship? I don't know if I could do that. And then here's where it gets very telling. I thought about the Air Force, and I go, I can't do it. And this is why, and I'm going to be very candid. By that time, I wasn't doing very well at all. And it was all because of my own fault. It was nothing to do with all those things that I had mentioned earlier. And, the bills aren't getting paid. The gas is getting turned off. I had the classic fist hole through the sheetrock in the living room. Maybe you can identify with something like that,
Oh, God.
From the past. But, it was just the classic on the way down, self-pity, rage, all that rolled up into just a mess. But I was the older brother, and my brother always looked up to me. Matter of fact, when we were kids and my dad, he was working all the time. So I was the guy. I was like dressing my brother, making my brother's lunch, getting him to school. I taught my brother how to ride his bicycle, and I was just only 4 years ahead of him. So, but now I'm writing postcards about how great I'm doing. And I was thinking, God forbid, I join the Air Force and I bump into my brother and he sees who I really am. So I was like, I can't. And then it hit me. United States Coast Guard, speedboats, chicks. You know, my ego immediately started to grow up again. And I'm like going, yeah. You know, Miami Vice was like the big show. So I was like, this is going to be awesome, right? I'll end up at the Jersey Shore. Chicks dig these guys.
Nailed it.
Yeah. Well, they didn't tell me about the 378-foot Coast Guard cutter that patrols the Bering Sea. And so now I'm standing on the pointy end of this ship. It was the U.S. CGC. It was a high endurance cutter, and it was the Jarvis, right? Which now I think is decommissioned, and some Saudi billionaire owns it and redone it. I don't know. It could be anywhere, but it's no longer in our fleet.
He's like it's like a bad guy in James Bond.
Yeah, I
trolling
think
the waters.
someone like that. I think recommissioned the ship, painted it a new color, and that's what they're doing. But at the time, I was thinking, at that time in my mind, figures. Why has this always happened to me? You know, I didn't see that I couldn't see that all these situations now had to do with my decision making. You know what I mean? I decided to do these. I decided to run with my fear of looking bad in art school, you know, to push me out of school and join the Coast Guard. Now I'm blaming the Coast Guard that I'm on this, you know, ship in the Bering Sea. And things spun out of control really fast, thank God, while I was out there. You know, while I was on the Jarvis. And I say thank God because it got me to a place where I was willing to learn, and the things that the military taught me from this point on, including from before that, I just couldn't see them. But from this point on, rocketed me into, you know, the life I am so grateful for today and appreciate every day. And I ended up in an extreme amount of trouble, all by my own doing. I don't need to go into details. It doesn't really matter and doesn't affect the story or my life in any way to even go into all the details. But it got me to a place where I was in so much trouble that I had to show up for, you know, a captain's mast and some other things that I really particularly thought I didn't want to do. And I thought, I was actually considering at the time, you know, I got to run away from this. This is terrible. And I was loaded with, you know, self-pity, self-hate, and blame, and just like, it was just a mess. But what happened was, I had met some more. I was brought back to Pearl Harbor. I was in Hawaii. Yeah, it sounds like paradise, but listen, if you're miserable at 23 years old, when you're at like the peak of your physical condition, I mean, you can't see me on this radio program, but like, I used to have a full head of hair. You know what I mean? And I'm living in paradise. I mean, if you're miserable, and this was obvious, it was like, if I'm feeling this much pain and self-loathing and I'm in paradise, it's obvious it's not my environment. It's something to do with me. And that awakening led to that, and the seeming punishment that I got from the captain's mast. And I say seeming punishment because it actually was just the thing I needed that led me on, you know, this road, for lack of a better word, of success. One of the things was I had to go through a rehabilitation center at Pearl Harbor. And the Coast Guard is like the ugly stepchild of the Navy. You know what I mean? Like, in times like this, okay, what are we going to do? I mean, even though at that time we fell under the Department of the Treasury, which we had been under since the days of Thomas Jefferson, we were actually the first seagoing service for this country, 1770, you know, since 1778. And we were always under the Department of the Treasury because the big thing was piracy and tariffs and stuff like that. That was, you know, what we were doing at that time. But when situations like this happen, we're thrown in with the Navy, and I'm so grateful. This is where I came face to face with Marines that have changed my life, because this was run by Marines and Navy. You know, I was fortunate, or at the time I thought unfortunate, to get thrown in a group with a master gunnery sergeant, and his name is Mike Urton. I'm forever grateful. And this guy, half of me, it was like, this is the meanest. I don't want to be in this guy's group. You know what I mean?
Right.
This guy is not going to be kind to me. I want someone to be nice and kind because I've been through a lot, at that time. And I knew this guy is just going to, lean into me. And I didn't like, why couldn't I get the nice petty officer who leads that group? Why do I have to? You know why? Because nothing happens in God's world by mistake. That's why. So I end up walking into this group first day, and there's the rest of the people there have been there for I don't know how many weeks, right? So I'm the new guy, and we're all in our uniform. There's no in our uniforms. There's no anonymity in this group. So you know who's the officers, you know who's in the Navy, and who's in the Coast Guard. Me, one guy, right? So yeah, and Mike Urton, this guy. At that time, this guy was like, he looked like a bull. You know what I'm talking about? He's in his, his short sleeve dress Marine uniform, your work uniform, the tan top, with the nice slacks, pressed, chest full of medals, big arms, and he was like gruff. He even had that chin, the haircut. This guy, if you drew a cartoon of a Marine, this was him. If you cast a movie and you want a Marine gunny sergeant, this is the guy, right? So it was incredible. So I go in there, and he was like, all right, Fusaro, so why don't you tell us, how you ended up here? So what I did was I just told the story that I told you guys in a few seconds in the beginning of our interview. But in the way I would tell it back then was it was the hero victim storytelling. Like, I went through this, and then this happened, and then this happened, and I would use all those seemingly negative things. And I'm not discounting anyone who's listening who has lost, family members, like I have, through either illness or something terrible as a murder. I'm not in any way trying to be disrespectful about that. What I am talking about is I went through that stuff, but in times like this, I would use it as a blank check. Like, I've gone through all this, feel sorry for me. I was hoping enough so I wouldn't be punished to the degree that I believed I should be punished. Do you know what I mean? Or maybe I'll get out of this if you feel sorry for me enough. It's
Right.
gross. It's nothing. There's nothing masculine about it. Yet at the time I thought it was working. So I get through this whole thing, and then my mom left, and then this, and I don't know, and where. And I finally get done. Everyone's quiet. Oh yeah, we could swear on this show. Oh, okay, I've been holding back. Well, this is perfect then, because Master Gunny Sergeant just looks at me and he says, "You know what you are, Fusaro? You're a phony fuck." And at first it was like, it was like a punch to the solar plexus, and I was overwhelmed with, because I was so self-conscious of all those other people in there, and he said this. But then as soon as that feeling went through me, I felt relief. It was exactly what I needed to hear. The jig is up. I don't have to pretend anymore. It was so liberating. But then what he said next really blew my mind. And this is the thing that, this is life in a nutshell. And he said this. He said, "You want to know how a coward goes through life, Fusaro? And I thought for sure he's going to say, just like you little worm. You know what I mean?
Right.
You little piece of shit. You need to take responsibility. Like, I was expecting all the stuff that I would tell myself about myself, or that I would hear others tell me that I knew I deserved to hear, and instead of that, because he said, you want to know how a coward goes through life? And instead of saying all that, he put up his fist like he was about to prepare for a fist fight. And he said, this is how a coward goes through life. And then he said, I wasted my entire life going through every situation like this because I was afraid of life. He said, wouldn't it be great to go through life like this? And he opened his arms up, wide, with his hands open, like hugging the world. And I was like, yes. And in my mind, I go, I would do anything to go through life like this, through like that.
Yeah.
And from that moment forward, my life has changed. At that time, I was busted down to lower than boot camp. My rank was lower than a recruit. I mean, I'm serious. I'm not kidding. And within months of going through this and continuing to do all the things I learned there, I mean, my positions improved. And I was always looking to add value, I didn't call it that at the time, but that's what it became. And I went from the lowest ranking and not really particularly liked by my commanding officer in the Coast Guard with good reason because of my behavior, to just 3 years later, that same commanding officer, I had now been given, within just a short amount of time of going through that rehabilitation center, learning everything I could and trusting everything that Mike taught me, Master Gunnery Sergeant Mike Urton taught me, that I ended up becoming the one Coast Guard member attached to a joint services task force called Hawaii Armed Services Police, that we were because there's such a big military presence in Hawaii that they needed, shore patrol and MPs to be able to cross over into the civilian community and law enforcement community and back over into the military community. And by the time my enlistment was up, 3 years later, I was the military liaison to the prosecuting attorney. Of Honolulu, of the whole state. He's based in Honolulu, but of Hawaii. Wow. And my office was on civilian ground. My office was right next in the civilian prosecutors' offices was my office with my name on the door. I worked civilian hours with the hours I worked were the hours of the prosecuting attorney. I reported to a base at Fort DeRussy in Waikiki. I mean, my life rapidly improved. And as my enlistment was over, during this time, I was also adding value with great gratitude to the Coast Guard through my artistic ability. I would draw the Coast Guard, if the Coast Guard needed a logo, in addition to my duties, I would draw them logos. I drew them a mascot, a cartoon mascot. It was Pokey the surfer. So, I'd draw him in different situations for them. And I thought at the end of my enlistment, I would apply to art school. So when I went in for my re-enlistment interview, 6 months before I was about to end my enlistment, my first 4 years, the commanding officer. Now, this is the thing. Like, a lot of other people were going, oh, you better not tell them that you want out, because then they'll stick you on a ship your last 6 months. And even then, I mean, I was a pretty accepting guy, but still, I did not want to spend another 6 months on a ship again. You know what I mean?
Right.
Once in the Bering Sea is enough. And if you ever watch Deadliest Catch, trust me, it's exactly like that. It's not like, this isn't like surfing around Bermuda. I mean, this is a mess. But the thing is, I went in to talk to my commanding officer, and this guy already, I still had some fear, you know. I mean, this was the guy who didn't particularly care for me just 3 years earlier. I mean, of course, my marks have skyrocketed. I had been sober all that time. Matter of fact, part of my conditions of enlistment after going through that rehabilitation center was, if I was ever, you know, I had to be tested regularly, which I was fine with. I was like, I don't care, because I'm in this. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I had found something. My life had taken such a drastic change in direction for the better. I had no problem. You want to test me? Test me. Call me in any time. I'm up for it. I went from the worst Coast Guardsman to like the best, you know, and I took pride in it. Because I was working in the civilian community, I would start to look at my job as, you know, a lot of these people, I'm probably going to be the only example firsthand of a guy who's in uniform, because I had to wear my uniform, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be the best example. I'm going to be a nice guy. I'm going to be like an ambassador of goodwill for the military. And it actually gave me like a fun goal, a sense of purpose to have. And 3 years in, my enlistment's coming up, 6 months left. I'm scared of this commanding officer. I want to tell, half of me in the fear wants to tell him what I think he wants to hear. I love the guard and blah, blah, blah. So I don't get, but I'm really going to sneak out at the end of the 6 months, but I don't want to be put on the ship. But by this time, that drive to manipulate was like it hadn't been exercised. It started to atrophy, and that's a good thing. So he goes, okay, Fusaro, where do you see yourself, you know, as far as your career in the Coast Guard, if any? And it just came out. I said, sir, I love my job. I love everything the Coast Guard has done for me. And that being said, I really don't see myself making a career out of this, you know, a 20-year career. And he said, okay. He goes, what are you considering? And I said, well, sir, I'm considering going back to art school. I quit before I joined the Coast Guard, and it's something I would like to finish. And then he says, have you gotten anything lined up for art school yet? I said, no, sir, I have not. And he goes, well, why don't you do this? Now that we know this, why don't you extend for another year, and let's work on getting things lined up for art school, and this will give you time to do that. And then by the end of the year, you should be set. If not, you let me know. And now I had to ask the scary part, you know, the scary question. Because I was like, even though this is all good news, I'm like shrinking to like the size of, you know, Fred Flintstone in episode 617, where he just keeps shrinking in front of the boss. So I'm like, and I go, I probably even sounded like a little kid, because that's what it felt like. I go, at the same job? And he goes, of course at the same job. He goes, you're doing a great job. Why would I move you? And I was like, wow, he's right. Like that's the most logical thing. Like, if you're doing a great job somewhere, why would they move you? You know, but my fear was still would lurk these crazy ideas.
Right.
And that's what I did. I stayed in for that additional year. And I ended up enrolling into art school. And then I ended up getting a call from the Department of the Army. I was still a inactive reservist. I actually did reserve time as well, active reserve, after that year for some time. And then when I was on my inactive reserve on my 6th year, it would have been, well, maybe it was longer. But anyway, whatever the case, it was in the year 1990, I get a call from the Army, the Secretary of the Army, and the Secretary of the Army called me in to award me with a Army Commendation Medal. I mean, now it's not uncommon because of the, since the Persian Gulf War, for Coast Guard members to receive medals like this from other branches of service. But at this time, it was a pretty rare occurrence.
Yeah.
And
No, that's outstanding.
yeah, and it's for meritorious service. Here, let me just read a part of it, because this was the only reason I got this award, was because of that personal goal that I gave myself to, like, be the best example, like be an ambassador of all branches of service. You know what I mean? Like, if people, like, don't be rude, be mindful. I was smoking cigarettes at the time,
Right.
and I even became hyper mindful of my smoking. Like I didn't want to be smoking. And this is, guys, we were smoking in the police station. We were smoking online to get your driver's license. I mean, I don't know if you could wrap your head around that. Smoking was allowed everywhere. But when I was out and about, I was like even becoming mindful of that. I was going because I see a lot of little kids, and I'm like a man in uniform. Like I could perceive myself as that. So it really helped. Give me a goal, gave me a standard to live up to. And at the end of the final line in this award, because it goes on and on and on, like they're writing. I mean, it's a brilliant. I mean, it's wonderful. When I first got it, I was in tears. But the last line sums it all up. It says, his personal efforts have resulted in superior relations between the Honolulu Police Department and the military services. Seaman Fusaro's dedication and exemplary devotion to duty reflect great credit on him and the United States Coast Guard. And I got that for a period from October 1985 to January of 1989. That's what this award encompasses. It encompasses a 4-year period of consistent behavior above and beyond. And I'm not saying this as brag, because it wasn't my intention. It was just this personal goal. And I even took it a step higher. Like, I started thinking, well, you know what? We're all really just ambassadors of God's love. Like, what if we're all just, I mean, this may sound hokey, but it helps me live to a higher standard. And you know what? I ended up benefiting it in the way I feel and in the way I add value to other people's lives.
Very cool. Honestly, it's inspiring. It's inspiring also knowing where it wound up leading to, because you've done some amazing things. And I especially love, your stories of the Four Seasons and New York and your transition and the bulbs.
Oh yeah.
And all of these wonderful things. I wonder if you could tell our audience members about that as well.
Yeah, well, since leaving the service, these are the great things that I learned from the service too. Very important things.
Yes.
It seemed ridiculous because we've just kind of went over my fall and rise. But then there's these general things that sound like they have nothing to do with living a successful life in the civilian world or in life in general. And one of them is the idea of surrender. And I'm not talking about surrender in in times of war. I'm not talking about surrender in regard to the enemy. I'm talking about, in times like that. I'm talking about surrender within to this larger knowing, this knowing that goes beyond what's just encased in my skull. And I didn't become aware of this, aware of it as something I could tap into until I was in the military. And it came through seemingly unrelated training. And that's where the military, the things we learn in the military, and that's why that movie, I mean, everyone loves this movie, Karate Kid. You know, the original one is so awesome. And we all, civilian, military, it doesn't matter. We all love the fact that what Mr. Miyagi is teaching, God, I forgot the kid's name.
Danielson.
Yes, Danielson seems so unrelated to fighting, right? Martial arts. Wax on, wax off. Go wax my cars, you know, go polish my shoes. Go do these things that you're saying, this isn't going to help me, right?
Yeah, it's
making
bullshit.
Making my bed, knowing how to make my bed perfectly. How is this going to help me? You know, how are these things going to help me? And they seem like it's a joke, you know? Well, all those things, just like at the end, we're so excited when we see that wax on, wax off taught him how to deflect blows. Like, and now it's like just natural part of his his intuition. He just go, whoa, 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 whoa. It's like, whoa, how'd I know? I can't believe I knew how to do that. Well, that's a lot of the things we learn in the service. At the time, you're going, oh, this is beneath me. You know, this is insulting my intelligence. You know what I mean? And, you know, think that all you want, because later in life, you're going to be like, holy cow, this stuff's saving my butt. And what I mean by surrender is, and we learned it in the Coast Guard, but I'm just going to rewind many, many years before I joined. I was in the Jersey Shore. I was probably about 6 years old. And, you know, the water is real, churns up a lot of sand. You really can't see well underwater at the Jersey Shore. And there's usually a strong current or undertow you got to watch out for. And there was no parents next to me. I was just out having fun, body surfing, and all of a sudden I got caught up in the current somehow, and I was being pulled under, and I'm being tossed. I'm underwater, and I'm like, at one point I felt myself like I got to reach the surface, and I start paddling really hard, and I hit the bottom. You know, I was so disoriented, I hit the bottom. Oh. And then something inside me, like after I did that, I went, oh no, what am I going to do? And then this, I don't know if it was a voice, but this thought, and this thought was way more adult than me. You know, you could call it God, whatever you want. I had no idea what it was or where to put it. And this is all going to tie into what I learned later on in the military. But it just said, relax, let go, like surrender, relax. You'll be okay if you just relax. I stopped paddling. I like went limp. I listened to it. And then all of a sudden, whoosh, my head popped out of the water. It was incredible. I didn't give that much thought until years later when I was in Coast Guard. We do a lot of swimming, in case your listeners don't know. I mean, that's like our primary thing is to swim. So, you know, if you don't really like swimming, I didn't particularly love swimming, but you'll learn to like it by the end of boot camp. And a couple of things they taught us is this, you know, the same rule applies. It was constantly drilled into us. Never, under any circumstances, it was basically taught to us fighting to stay alive, like, I mean, frantic, fearful, like competing to stay alive, you will die out there. Meaning, never, under any circumstances, swim against the current, no matter how strong the desire. Because in those moments of panic, you're going to want to fight the current, right, to get to where you think is safe. And you're just going to wear yourself out and die. If you're in cold water, you're going to just end up with hypothermia faster than you can imagine and, you know, lights out.
Yeah.
So this idea of letting go, and then in rescue, you know, for rescue, what did we learn? First thing, go in feet first. Calm. The first thing is calm the victim down before you go near them, before you make the approach. Over and over, I'm here to help you. I'm here to help you. Relax. I'm here to help you. And they said feet first, meaning on your back, as you're telling them, keep your feet in front of you. If you could imagine, it's like I'm sitting in the water. I'm like treading water, but my feet are out in front of me, keeping me up. Why? Because you might have to kick them hard. Because a panicked person will, if they grab a hold of you, will drown you before you could help them.
Right, yeah.
So let's continue with surrender, shall we? Well, now, what did they teach us next? They do exercises where you're grabbed and, because these people will, anybody. I'm not these people. If you're in a situation out of your element and you're panicking, you're going to just do anything, no matter how insane and selfish, to stay alive yourself, okay? Mm-hmm. So I don't want to make anyone feel bad. But, we would have to go through where someone would grab you and they're wrestling with you and you're going under. And you know what they taught us?
What's that?
And it's punch them in the nose. Not punch them in the belly, not pull their hair, punch them directly in the nose. Elbow them. And you know what? I don't care. I'm sure a Marine that's listening, I'm sure there's more than one. For a fact, once you get popped in the nose, it's like, okay, whoa, time out. You know what I mean? It's not like, Stallone takes like 30 shots to the nose. You get hit in the nose, man. You're like, whoa. It throws your game off, for a little bit, So anyway, so they would teach that. And the reason that you got to render the person helpless before you could save their life, And this, on the bigger sense, has now become the thing that's really helped me succeed in all these other areas since the service, is realizing that all of life flows in a current, a positive current. Life wants to live. If you're spiritual, if you're religious, you have other ways to say the same thing. There's nothing negative about God. God is a positive God. The metaphysical belief, Jungian philosophy will say life always flows in a positive direction. In psychology, why do we feel good when we think thoughts that are uplifting thoughts, supportive thoughts, encouraging thoughts? Why? Because they flow in a healthy direction in our mind. I like to look at a bigger, more spiritual, and the way religions tend to look at it, and spirituality, because I believe it goes way beyond just thoughts in our head, and I've seen evidence of this in my life. So now, since getting out of the Coast Guard, I wanted to go back to art school, and this is where I learned to start swimming with the spiritual current, or life's current, and not try to fight against it, but learn the law of non-resistance. And non-resistance isn't like I'm a doormat. Non-resistance, it's actually, rather than being a doormat, it's actually the most powerful and successful way you could live once you get a clear understanding that, non-resistance just means I'm going to accept the situation as it is in this moment. Now what that does is it allows my mind to relax, like rendering that person helpless. And now what happens is I can get saved, meaning I start now to have creative thoughts on how to move forward from where I am now that I've accepted this situation. I start becoming more aware of what's good in this situation and how to move in that direction than I am about fighting it and why I'm not getting my way and I'm going to demand my way. That never leads anywhere good. I'm not saying that some causes aren't worth fighting for, but more often than not, we end up fighting battles we shouldn't be fighting, and it takes time to become more and more, aware of this and then good at, knowing how to roll with it.
Yeah, I know, right?
Thank you for listening to another episode of Cigars and Sea Stories. This has been part 1 of our interview with Darrel Fusaro.
Please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. Give us your comments, your thoughts. Tell us how we can make the show better. Who else do you want us to interview? On this episode of Cigars and Sea Stories, Coast Guard veteran and an all-around badass, Darrel Fusaro. How should I put this, though? On this episode of Cigars and Sea Stories, Coast Guard veteran, Hollywood legend, world-renowned, spiritual aficionado, and grandmaster wizard of awesomeness, Darrel Fusaro.